Welcome to Booked, the bookstore education podcast brought to you by the American Booksellers Association. This episode is part of our Indies Introduced series, where we spotlight debut authors handpicked by booksellers from around the country. In each episode, a bookseller from the Indies Introduced panel will interview the author of a debut title featured in our program.
All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Kalli King, and I am from Rediscovered Books in Boise, Idaho. Today, I am going to be in conversation with DeAndra Davis. So a little bit about DeAndra. DeAndra Davis is New York born and Florida bred. She's a hopeless musical theater nerd. Wicked is definitely her favorite. A perpetual student and teacher, and always trailed by a kid or a dog because she has way too many of both. She has an opinion for everything, an argument ready, and a hug for everyone. And she thinks you should too. All the Noise at Once is her debut novel, on sale April 15th, 2025. And we are here to discuss the novel and learn a little bit more about DeAndra. So, DeAndra, hello.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited.
Of course, I'm so excited to get to talk to you. I really loved reading your novel, and it was very inspirational to me. So I was just wondering, what was your inspiration for telling this story?
Yeah, so I think inspirations came from a couple different places, right? It's kind of an amalgamation of things. And so one of the primary things obviously is myself, right? I myself am autistic, but I also have autistic kids, right? And one of my kids specifically was kind of front of mind, right? When I was thinking about kind of the character of Aiden, and why Aiden needed to be who he was. Outside of that too, like kind of where the football element comes in, because I know a lot of people like ask me that, like, why football? And it's like football is like a big part of kind of like a big part of our lives. Like my husband used to play football, and he's one of the reasons why I know anything about football, way too much about football as far as I'm concerned. But but it's definitely one of those things where all of those things kind of came together. And I think when I first started getting the ideas for this, right? When I first started getting the ideas for this, it was a while back, so a long time coming, but it was especially at the height of, unfortunately, a lot of incidents of kind of like police brutality, especially when it came to people who were Black. And then I think one that absolutely stood out to me, especially, was it happened here in Florida. I want to say it was Miami, but I could be unsure. I know it was in South Florida though. And there was a man who got out. I believe he was in kind of like a group home type situation. And he was autistic, and he had gotten out, and he had something that he was like playing with. I don't know if it was like an airplane, something that was in his hand. And he was in the middle of the street, and cops had him essentially surrounded, and guns pointed. And, his caretaker is out there, and he's just like, hey, he does not have a weapon, right? He is not dangerous. He is autistic. Like, please do not shoot. They shot anyway. They hit the caretaker.
Oh, goodness.
They shot anyway. They hit the caretaker, but they shot anyway. And the only thing that I could think to myself, right, was if this was a situation in which his caretaker was not there, right? Which, like, goodness, it's terrible that he was hurt. But it's just, if this was a situation in which his caretaker was not there, right? This autistic man would have just been shot for essentially nothing, right? And so I was thinking about that, right? And I was just thinking about, identities and the ways in which our identities compound, and intersect and create very, very unique situations that maybe we would be in that other people would not be in. And so all of that kind of inspired the shape that this story has taken.
Yeah, that it was one of the most intense parts in it, is the incident with not only, people of color and an autistic boy, but they're also minors. Like, they're all just kids, and these adult men on the police force come and just assume the situation and definitely was, yeah. I was
And
it
that's
was an intense
inspiration
thing for
too.
me.
Yeah,
Hmm.
and I think even the idea of them being minors, that comes from, unfortunately, I hate to say it, but like that comes from personal experience. I asked my husband like when was his first like experience with a police officer, and he was just like, yeah, he was like, I was like 10. He's like, I was like 10, I was playing outside. He's like, I was playing outside and we were just like playing in the street and they came through and they like slammed us on the ground. They were like, get your fat ass in the house, and like was screaming at everybody, and it
Ugh.
was and he can remember that, right? He can remember that that was the first time, right? 10 years old, right? And stories like that, things like that, that makes me think, right? Because I remember even at the time I'm like, oh no, our like my son who is autistic, he's 11, and so I'm just like waiting on eggshells, like when is something going to happen? And that's such a horrible feeling, right? But
Hmm.
even that, right, that was something I had to think about, right? How does a minor behave in this situation where a minor really shouldn't have to be dealing with this?
Yeah. Yeah, I also really liked the fact that they're a well-off family. Like
Mm-hmm.
they're doing pretty well in life, and they are not uh they're still going to be included in police brutality. Like they can still be affected by that, even through, because there's this kind of stereotype that the people who are being targeted from police brutality are like criminals, or they're poor
Mm-hmm.
people, or, people who are at the lower end of the, in like lower class situations.
Mm-hmm.
But these people are not lower class, like definitely not. They're like, so they're, no one can escape this.
Yeah. And I
Mhm.
think that's the message I want to send too, is that like we think that we can exempt ourselves, and unfortunately, oftentimes we can't, right? That was one of the things that my mom, like, it's like I said, I was born in New York, but my mom, she moved us to Florida, mostly because she was like, I wanted to make you guys safer. And she put us in a gated community. That was the reason why I wrote it in a gated community, right? Like one of those big master planned kind of suburban communities, right? Behind a gate, behind all of these things
Mhm.
that you think are supposed to protect you and stop you from running into certain things, right? And to an extent, right, when you're behind the gate, yeah, everything's fine, right? Because most of the
Mhm.
time police don't come through there. They can't just come and police the area freely. But when you're past that gate, everything looks exactly the same, right?
Mhm.
And that was one of the things that I really wanted to explore there, right? Is that we think that, if we just move them into this gated community, if we move them into this place, that, we'll be a little bit safer. But the thing is, past that gate, everything is still the same out there. So,
Mhm.
there is still a certain level of safety that we have to have, that maybe you wouldn't have to worry about if maybe you looked a little bit differently.
Right. Mhm. So what was, kind of moving on in a natural way, like what is the most challenging part when you were writing this story? What was hardest to write?
I will say, as much as I say, okay, I picked football because I love football because of my husband. Um, I also am bad at things like this. So I'm horrible spatially. Like my husband makes fun of me. My spatial awareness is terrible, right? I'm terrible at understanding where things are in space, how close something is to another thing, right? If I'm driving, sometimes like the front of my car, I'll be like turning and he's like, "You're fine." I'm like, "No, I feel really, really close to the thing." He's like, "You're really not." Right. And so and so having to write this character who essentially was the opposite of me and has this kind of like heightened sense of spatial awareness, right? Where their spatial awareness is amazing and they know where everything is in space and they have
Mhm.
a great idea of like distance, of like how far something is from something else and how many yards they have to go here. And yeah, that was I had to draw a lot of maps, right? Because that was another thing, like for me to understand, like even things like fight scenes and like scenes of confrontation, a lot of those things, it's harder for me to write because I have like a lot of trouble, like I said, figuring out where things are in space. So the only way for me to get through scenes like that or do certain things, and you even kind of see it in the book. Sometimes I write things like in that incident scene, there's kind of like an X's and O's type map drawn out. And
Mhm.
I thought it was fun to put in there because it's similar to football. Like it was something that I could help understand, right? I draw out maps of, okay, this is where someone is standing, this is where someone else is standing, this is where someone would have vantage point of something else, right? And things like that help me figure things out. So I think that was the hardest thing was just figuring out where everything was in space. So I drew a lot of maps because I'm bad at that.
Hmm. I would never have known if you hadn't said anything, because I think, especially with the maps, it totally made sense to me with the way that Aiden thinks that he would like imagine it in this way. Um, Even like outside of the football field, he could like that mentality and that picturing of everything kind of is set in that football kind of idea.
Mhm.
Um, so you are now going to be published soon in like 3 weeks. That's so exciting. Ah.
Terrifying.
So what has been your favorite part so far of getting published?
Okay, this is a little bit of a cop out, but one of my favorite part, I just went to Winter Institute. That was so fun. Oh my goodness, I'd never
Mhm.
had an experience like that. And I think that I think maybe the answer is like the community that comes with this. I feel like I never expected such such amazing community. I think because like when you're a writer, you feel like you're just like this little gremlin in a hole somewhere, just like just tapping away at your computer, right? You're just tapping away at your computer in your little hidey hole, just making words, right? And you don't expect it to bring you this amazing community. And it was great. Like it was invigorating. I had such an amazing time. Being around everyone was great. Like it's everyone's so encouraging. Booksellers are the nicest people in the world, right? Like, really, they are the nicest people in the world. Like, if you need some people to make you feel good about yourself, get around some booksellers, okay?
Mhm.
But really, like, it was just such an amazing experience, and I valued it so much. I still think about it. I still have my little name tag. I'm probably gonna keep it. But
I
but no,
would.
I think right. I
Yeah.
feel like I'm gonna keep it. I think getting the community. I think truly like my favorite part of all of this has been gaining community, meeting people, being around people, people who are just as passionate about this sort of thing
Mhm.
as I am, right? Almost like, what's a little collection of nerds. We're just getting together and having a good time.
That's basically all of Winter Institute. It's just book nerds.
And it's a good time. It's a good
Uh-huh.
time.
Yeah, that was so special getting to meet you in person there. Um, I love doing that. So, this is your first book.
Mhm.
Do you have anything that's, on the docket? What's your next project, if there is any, if you
I
could talk about it?
do.
Hmm.
I do. The funny thing is, that's so funny, right? Because I'm like, oh, I don't know how much I can talk about. I feel like I can though, right? Like it's on contract. It's fine, right? It's
Hmm.
fine. I feel like I've written things about it and no one's told me that I can't say it. So you know what? We're just gonna go from there. If I get into, what is it, right? You don't ask for permission, you just ask for forgiveness. So right? But my
Hmm.
next book, I'm really, really excited about. I think fans of this book are going to love it, but I think it's also going to be a good one to bring in also maybe some new readers. And
Hmm.
so my next book, it follows a female protagonist in what I like to call sort of a bisexual awakening book, right? Potential bisexual awakening book, right? But outside of that, though, I think it's a really, really beautiful book about dealing with parental abandonment, dealing with culture. It deals a lot with what does it feel like to kind of be that hyphenated culture. My
Hmm.
main character is Jamaican American, right? And what does it feel like to not really feel like you're American enough in certain spaces, and also then
Hmm.
not feel like you're Jamaican enough in certain spaces, right? How do you
Hmm.
navigate that? How do you deal with that? And it follows her through a summer of her essentially trying to find her mother who abandoned her when she was a baby.
Oh.
And it is, I know, right? You hear it and you go, oh, but really, I promise it's so much more fun. Like I think just in the same way that if I give someone the tagline for my debut, they go, oh, that sounds sad, but then you read it and you're like, wait, there's some fun in here too, right?
Hmm.
I think it's the same way, right? There's games of Never Have I Ever, there's breaking and entering.
Mm-hmm.
There's, truth or dare. There's a lot of fun in there too, and a lot of self-discovery. And I can't lie, this one's a little bit close to my heart. So I'm really excited about this one.
That sounds really good. I can't wait to take a look at that when it's a little bit farther down the line. Yay, that's exciting. I'm glad you have something else going on. That's the one thing that I really liked about the ending, or like towards the end of your novel, is that there's a lot of hope. Even though it's like a really difficult story, and there's a lot of real life stories that don't end well, this one, it gave me a lot of hope that, actually people can make the right choices sometimes. And like,
Mhm.
it takes a community, but we can do it. Like we can do it together.
I feel
Mm-hmm.
like you can't write kid lit without hope. Like genuinely, I feel like how can you do that to the
Mm-hmm.
kids, right? How can you do that to the kids, right? No, truly,
Uh-huh.
I feel like if you write kidlit, like even if it's in a difficult place, I think we have to show kids. I feel like the reason why, and I think it's interesting, right? Because where it ends up, all of the hope, everything that's centered around that, it has to do with the kids. It has to do with what all of the kids are doing, right? So
Mm-hmm.
it's not always what the adults are doing, but it's about what the kids are doing and the choices that they're making. And I felt like that was a really important message because I want kids to know that, like, this is the time to screw up. You're
Mm-hmm.
gonna screw something up. And it might
Mm-hmm.
be big, it might be small, but you're gonna screw something up, right? But even if you do screw something up, don't think that you can't come back from it, right? I
Mm-hmm.
think that, like, the biggest lies that we tell is that, like, we are defined by our worst mistakes and we're defined by the worst things that we have ever done, right? And I think that by setting those things in our head, right, we make it so that we can't grow past anything. And I think that the
Mm-hmm.
most important things to tell kids at this point too is that you can continue to grow. You don't have to be locked into anything. It is never too late to change something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's one of my favorite things to say, especially to like people coming into work, is that like you're gonna make mistakes, but just own up to the mistakes and keep learning from them. And like it's okay to make mistakes, but yeah, when those mistakes are really big and you feel ashamed, it can be really difficult. But you can build off of them and come back and become a better person. Sometimes uh better than what you would have if you hadn't made that mistake.
Yep.
So yeah, I love it. All right, this is my last question. I love to ask authors this question whenever I see them. What is on your nightstand? What are you reading?
I I am so basic. I am reading what the rest of the world is reading. I'm reading Oathbound right now. I'm reading
Nice.
Oathbound with the rest of the world. Okay. Actually, no. So I was reading Oathbound like the rest of the world. I just finished, but I am currently, again, like the rest of the world. I'm basic. I am not special. I am not different. I am basic. I am reading Sunrise on the Reaping. I I'm I can't. I'm just doing what everybody else is doing. I'm
Uh-huh.
not any special. So Oathbound and Sunrise on the Reaping, right?
Nice.
Tracy Dion and Suzanne Collins, they're keeping me going right now as I
Yeah.
do some drafting.
I I'm also reading Sunrise on the Reaping. So yeah, you're right. The whole world is reading that book right now. At our local library, we have there's like 50 holds per copy of the book. And that includes audiobooks. Like everyone wants to read this book. It's so crazy.
No, it's
Oh.
and it's good. It's good. That's the thing. And you know what, if you want to stay in hibernation and just give me a little bit of new characters every so, I'm good with that. Do that. You know what? Do everybody. Go back to everybody's Hunger Games. I will pull up for every single one of those books.
Oh, it was so great talking to you today. I'm so glad that we were able to meet and do this. I hope that your next project goes well. And again, the book All the Noise at Once comes out April 15th. So in just a few weeks, it will hit the shelves and hopefully people will pick it up. I know I will be giving it to as many people as I can.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for listening to Booked, the bookstore education podcast brought to you by the American Booksellers Association. Don't forget to subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast app. Additional educational resources can always be found on the ABA site at www.bookweb.org. Happy reading!